Today on Eye on Northwest Politics, the Trump administration at odds with the city of Portland over sending the National Guard to Portland and how Portland police respond to protests.
They are all lying and disingenuous and dishonest people.
We are doing the job that's expected of us.
Portland Police Chief Bob Day joins me to talk about tensions with the administration, a highly publicized visit from the Homeland Security Secretary, and handling homelessness with a camping ban in effect. Eye on Northwest Politics starts now. Thanks for joining us. This is Eye on Northwest Politics. I'm Ken Boddy. Let's get right to your top political headlines. Across the Portland Metro, voters said yes to more taxes this past election day. That includes a hefty increase for Portland parks. That levy sets a 75% higher property tax rate than the current expiring levy. Most of the money will go towards operations and staff. A recent parks audit criticized the Bureau for adding more parks instead of maintaining the current parks with millions in repairs needed. The new city council promises it will keep a close eye on spending those new tax dollars. Also on the ballot, public safety. Vancouver voters approving the public safety levy that adds 13 police officers as well as equipment and vehicles. In Washington County, a move to fund more police services with a 3% property tax increase passing. More on the special election and the message that voters sent nationwide coming up in this week's Give Me a Minute. And the U.S. Supreme Court considering a lawsuit heard Wednesday and led by Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield. The justices heard oral arguments in the case this week. Rayfield, along with attorneys general in 12 states and a coalition of business leaders, are suing the Trump administration over tariffs. They say President Trump doesn't have the power to impose those tariffs. The president argues that the tariffs give him critical leverage in economic and foreign policy. We'll keep you updated. Portland Police Chief Bob Day finds himself and the Portland Police Bureau in the spotlight these days, as President Trump's administration still battling in the courts to send National Guard troops into Portland, specifically to protect the ICE facility in South Portland. Most of the time, the protests are peaceful, often with just a dozen or so demonstrators even there. But Portland police have made more than 60 arrests since the demonstrations began this summer and recently removed the camp next to the ICE facility where protesters set up shop. All the while, the actions of Portland police under intense scrutiny. Portland Police Chief Bob Day is here to talk about all this. Chief Day, a longtime veteran of the Portland Police Bureau, came out of retirement to take this job in 2023. Chief Day, thanks for coming back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk about the ICE facility in South Portland. What kind of resources are Portland police committing to that area?
Yeah, this has been a very complex problem to try and manage, and a lot of competing interests, obviously. And I'm really proud of the way that Portland Police Bureau has been showing up in that space, going all the way back to June, when there was a high degree of violence and significant protests. We made over a dozen arrests. We took very intended specific action, focusing on violence and vandalism. Over the course of the summer, it was able to be monitored largely by the federal resources that are responsible for the building. And then with the escalation at the end of September, we have been much more intentional down there, interdicting behavior, and as you mentioned, made over 30 arrests in the last month. Yeah, and we've been doing it with a approach to crowd science that's unique really in the country. We are taking a very methodical, targeted approach to this. We have our dialogue liaison officers reaching out. We have our bike officers, and we are addressing individual behaviors and not really focusing on the whole crowd. I think that's really making a difference.
How does Portland, being a sanctuary city, limit what officers can and can't do?
Yeah, essentially the simplest way to understand it is we are not participating in immigration enforcement. And that includes anything to do with the building itself as far as the ingress and egress or any kind of enforcement action citywide. We are not engaged in that at all. So our responsibility is down there on the public way and the public streets. And I want to be clear that there's been some misunderstanding that maybe we have abandoned or neglected the South Waterfront area. I would argue that our response has been, very intentional down there to try and mitigate the difficulties that those neighborhoods and community and businesses are experiencing.
In January, the Bureau put out a video explaining the Police Bureau's stance on this, so let's take a look at that.
We want to remind our community that Portland police do not enforce federal immigration laws, and we also do not work with ICE to identify, arrest, or detain people just because they are undocumented.
Now, how has that played out in South Waterfront, especially considering that ICE's directives are different from yours?
Right. Well, first of all, we need to have clear lines of communication with our federal partners. And we've been establishing those over the last several months, and those are continuing today. So really understanding what the appropriate guidelines are for Portland Police, what we can and can't do, and also understanding where the authority lies and the decision-making or goals are of our federal partners. That facility is unique in that it also creates a space for legal immigration, for immigrants to come and be able to access paperwork and appointments to be able to manage the opportunity to immigrate legally to the country, as well as a detention facility or a holding place. So it really is down to communication and just making sure that we are staying appropriately in our lanes, which Portland Police has done very well over the last 6 months.
The administration keeps painting Portland as a city on fire, a war zone. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem came here. She really saw about a dozen protesters, including a guy in a chicken suit, called you, the mayor, the governor liars for telling her the city was not on fire, and that Portland police were not supporting Antifa, which was their charge at the time. What was your feeling coming out of that meeting with her?
Well, I was disappointed in the opportunity. I sought that meeting with her with the hopes that we could maybe arrive at some shared goals or some shared values for the city, for the community, really for the state as a whole. Clearly, they have, their intentions around whether it be immigration or their expectations around how we manage the area down there. And so, we basically agree to disagree in terms of what's the appropriate response. And right now, we are adamant that we are going to continue to support people's rights to free speech. We are not going to engage in immigration enforcement, but we are going to hold people accountable for acts of violence or vandalism. And we've been consistent on that from the beginning and have made a number of arrests that has dissipated some of the tensions down there through our enforcement and outreach efforts.
Some of the evidence presented in the federal court case seems to show ICE agents using force against what appear to be nonviolent protesters outside the ICE building. There's currently a case in Durango, Colorado. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where their police chief has actually called for a state investigation of ICE actions against a protester there. So, in terms of use of force, what are your officers told to do? And if they believe the feds are using excessive force against Portland citizens, how can they intervene?
Right. So, first of all, Portland police officers' use of force is governed both by state law and Portland Police Directive policy, which is one of the clearest and one of the most stringent in the land. We've been working, obviously, with the Department of Justice for a number of years under a settlement agreement and have drafted and created a force policy that is very just, very transparent, and our officers are adhering to that. In regards to the federal officers, they have also duties and responsibilities to their organizations, and there is a diverse number of organizations working down there, whether it be ICE, whether it be Bureau of Prisons, whether it be Federal Protective Service, et cetera. So they're really accountable in that regard. When we see force used, if we are participating in it, obviously it needs to be within our policy and within our state law. If we see force used that we deem as unacceptable, then as you saw in the testimony in the trial last week, we are recording that information, we're sharing that information, we're asking about that, and then presenting that to the proper authorities, whether it be federally or, as I mentioned in the trial last week, not shying away from it. And I'm really proud of our commanders who took the stand last week and spoke what they're seeing occurring down there.
Portland police have taken some heat from some public officials regarding the possibility of troop deployment. We recently had two prominent Oregon Republicans on this program. Here's what they had to say about the Portland Police Bureau.
Nobody wants to have troops in their town, but there was and is a way to avoid it, and that's to have the city police of Portland step up and do their job.
If I was governor today, there would be no conversation about troop deployments, because I would be demanding that local government and local law enforcement do their job.
What's your response when you hear that?
Well, I'd like to think with 3 decades of police experience, I've got a pretty good idea of what the job is. So I would be really encouraged to Portlanders that we are doing our job, and we're doing it with the manner and the approach that Portlanders desire. As I mentioned, doing a tremendous amount of outreach, but also doing enforcement, holding people accountable. This is a complex situation with many competing points of views, which does not have an easy answer or an easy soundbite. It's something that is going to continue to challenge all of us to be appropriate in our response to the many different competing needs, and we're doing that excellent every day.
Do you ever see instances where your officers are actually in conflict with the feds?
We have had incidents where at times there has been uses of force that has caught our officers off guard. For example, we've had some of our officers that have experienced tear gas, some of our officers that have been hit with pepper balls. And once again, trying to keep those lines of communication open so we understand why that's happening. And then there obviously are some laws that apply to the federal law enforcement that they may be enforcing that we may not be aware of or have knowledge of, certainly not supporting that, without, as I said, proper probable cause and good understanding of where our responsibilities lie.
Yeah, a complicated situation.
Yeah.
Next, we continue our conversation with Portland Police Chief Bob Day as we talk homelessness and the enforcement of the city's camping ban and the fire that destroyed a city councilor's vehicle and part of her home. We'll be right back. We are back with Portland Police Chief Bob Day, and let's move on to some other issues here. The latest point-in-time count on the homeless population in the metro area, it says that the population of homeless has risen 61% over 2 years, 12,000 homeless people in the Tri-County area, more than 10,000 in Multnomah County alone. This at a time when the city is again starting to enforce the camping ban on Portland streets. Are you going to be taking homeless people to jail now?
Well, this humanitarian crisis on our streets is the greatest threat, I believe, facing the city of Portland, and I am very appreciative of the mayor's leadership on this as he tries to implement a plan to really alleviate the suffering that we're seeing on our sidewalks and our public spaces. Obviously, there is an enforcement component on that I'll touch on, but I want to be clear that this effort is not being led by law enforcement. We are really the caboose on this train. There is a tremendous amount of effort being made in outreach, shelter placement, services, et cetera, that the city's invested in, partnering, of course, with the county and many CBOs, et cetera. But there has always been an enforcement component to this space, and many of these individuals are criminal justice involved, and they have warrants, or they are engaging in criminal behavior, and holding them accountable to those behaviors is a part of the process of trying to really end this crisis on our streets.
We've got mental health issues, drug addiction. There are factors in homelessness. What are your options when you actually encounter people? Is there enough treatment? Are there enough beds to take people to? Just tell me about the resources that you're able to access.
Well, it is a very anemic system. We don't have enough. I mean, reality is that we don't have enough services to be able to provide everyone who wants those services. That's just a reality that we have to face. But what we are attempting to do is take a holistic system thinking approach to this problem. So whether it be with the law enforcement perspective, we're working closely with the district attorney, we're working with the sheriffs, we're working with the judges, we're working with our deflection partners over at the county. So we're looking at a variety of options where there may be an enforcement component, there might even be involvement with the criminal justice system, but hopefully we can find additional services that we can pass them off to, maybe if we have to put them on a waiting list, maybe make a connection. But we are struggling, as a city and as a county to provide an adequate amount of resources on the back end. But these first steps are necessary to really identify the problem, to really maybe identify folks that are in need and ready to receive those services, and those that are not, begin to nudge them in that direction.
Is deflection working from your view?
Deflection has about a year of it under its belt, and for me, the jury's still out on the effectiveness of it. I'm proud of the work Portland Police Bureau's done. We've taken over 500 people to deflection. It has created a great off-ramp both for our officers and for community to keep people from cycling back through the justice system. So on concept, I really am a supporter of it, and we're looking at different options to enhance it. But I'm still questioning the metrics and what does success look like. I've had this conversation with the chair and others. We're at the table regularly. Really proud of Commander Hughes, Central Precinct Commander, who's been leading this along with the mayor's office and others. So we're going to stay very very much engaged in the deflection process.
You recently made an arrest in the case of the fire that destroyed City Councilor Candace Avalos' car and part of her home. Because of her political views, her position on the council, it made sense that people initially thought she may have been targeted in that fire. But you ruled that out pretty early in the investigation. Turns out the culprit was a homeless man trying to stay warm. So how'd you track him down, number one? And number two, how important was it to get this right?
Yeah, well, first of all, just good old-fashioned police work and partnership. Fire investigations are done in a co-responder model with both the Fire Bureau and the City of Portland. So hats off to fire. Of course, they were the first ones on the scene because it was a fire. They immediately launched an investigation as to the cause and origin, called upon us, given the high visibility and the potential for arson, the potential for political violence, certainly not lost on any of us, the world that we're living in today. We responded to the scene later that day and really dug into an extensive investigation that received a tremendous amount of resources and support. Our investigator actually forgoes some of her vacation to work this, and just by using, kind of traditional gumshoe detective work, put the pieces together, using video, sharing information, ultimately creating a flyer, and then our patrol officers at each precinct really being intentional, finding this gentleman, being able to take him into custody and, solicit the information we did. It was just really good work. And your point about getting this right, absolutely essential we get this right. My desire would be that, every fire of this nature gets the same level of attention. Quite frankly, it doesn't. We don't have the resources and the time to be able to do that for every crime that occurs in the city of Portland. But this does demonstrate what a well-funded, well-supported public safety system can do. And although the charges are misdemeanor charges, the messaging that we send to the community around the importance of safety and security, I think, was essential.
In terms of budget, you mentioned budget. There's always been issues with the amount of money going into your bureau, as well as staffing. You need to hire more officers. So where are we in terms of that process? What do you think about your budget? And what would it take to get the number of officers that you would like to see on the street?
Right. So, constitutional policing is expensive. That's the bottom line. Like, to do this job and to do it well and to meet the expectations that Portlanders have of their police bureau, it's going to cost money. And the reality is we do that at a high level every day. The mayor has been very much an advocate and supportive of increasing and growing the police bureau. We've put together a plan with an attempt to hire a minimum of 21 officers a quarter. I will tell you, we exceeded that for the first quarter of 25-26, and we're on track to exceed that here in the second quarter of this fiscal year. The goal is that within the next 3 years that we can try and reach our authorized strength of 877. I believe that number is inadequate. I've been clear that I think a proper number is more about 1,050 to 1,100. But what this is going to require is a sustained commitment by the City Council and by the Mayor and the City Administrator to continue to fund public safety at a level so we can continue to grow. We right now are on track this year to see some of the highest number of applicants we've seen since 2020. Our current hiring class put us over the 800 number mark for sworn officers, where we haven't been for a couple of years. And overall interest in the police bureau and applications, as I said, continue to grow. So we are on a great trajectory. I'm hoping that come spring, which is going to be a very difficult budget season for the city of Portland, that will recognize the value of that and be allowed to continue that momentum.
Got less than 30 seconds, but what's your relationship with the current city council and mayor? It's all new.
Right, yeah. It has been a work in progress for all of us, and give a great deal of grace and deference to those that are trying to figure out this new system, myself included. I speak with the mayor regularly, several times a week. Really grateful for his support and his prioritization of safety for all Portlanders, and so we're very much aligned in that. And with City Council, I would say we're just still getting to know each other. There's certainly a lot of opinions out there, but I'm committed to working with anyone that's willing to help Portland be safer and better for all.
Portland Police Chief Bob Day, thanks for coming back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thanks, Ken.
Next, Coin political analyst Rick Metzger weighs in on Tuesday's election results. What did we learn from voters this time around? Give me a minute, right after the break.